One of my earliest childhood memories revolves around the mythology of He-Man. I remember as a boy of 3 years old running downstairs from my room on Saturday mornings and plopping myself down on the couch in front of the television to catch the next episode of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. There was something captivating about this show. It was like no other cartoon I had seen, at the same time both epic and strange. The scenes of Prince Adam holding up the sword of power and shouting out, "I have the power!" were burned into my mind. And Skeletor. Oh, I can never forget the chills that ran down my little toddler body from that villain. He-Man had indeed made its impression on me. Little boys, however, eventually grow up, and as a result, boyhood fascinations are oftentimes forgotten. But not always forever. A few weeks ago, I was perusing through my local thrift store in the university city of Lund on my lunch break, like I usually do every Tuesday. And like usual, there wasn't that much that caught my interest among the furniture, baby clothes, and DVDs. But then, I suddenly caught eye of it. At the bottom of the shelf of games and puzzles, buried under a host of other boxes, was this odd, brightly colored board game, Masters of the Universe. There he was, leaping off of the cover of the box in brilliant 1980s artwork, He-Man, riding upon Battle Cat in defense of Castle Grayskull and in the fight for the future of Eternia. I'd never heard of this game before. From the Swedish company Alga. I had no idea that they had a license for this IP back in the day. What did it say on the box? 1984, yeah, that's about right. This game came out when 3-year-old me was sitting wrapped up in my blanket on the couch in front of the TV. $3? Well, definitely worth a shot. So I grabbed the game, paid at the register, and ran back to my office to see what kind of treasure I had found. And here is what I discovered. Masters of the Universe, an exciting adventure game, released in 1984 by the company Alga. Alga is a Swedish game company that was founded in Stockholm in 1917 as a sister company to Pressbyrån. Pressbyrån is Sweden's equivalent to 7-Eleven. Now, this company was founded in order to start producing and selling games to supplement Pressbyrån's sales of magazines and books. In 1980, a new guy stepped into the role of Chief of Product Development, Dan Glimne. Glimne, a graduate of Lund's Technical College, had been in the swing of things for a while at Alga when the idea landed on his table to contact the toy company Mattel and to begin to develop a He-Man game. Glimne was responsible for the construction and design of the game, and he was joined by illustrator Anders Jeppsson. Glimne was clearly in the fantasy flow at this time. Not only was he working on this game, but in the following year he would also, together with Jakob Bonds, release the fantasy board game Drakborgen. Drakborgen, interestingly enough, would receive a second version in 1987, Drakborgen number 2, which would be picked up by Games Workshop and released in 2 expansion packs as Dungeon Quest 1987 and Dungeon Quest Catacombs 1988. But anyway, back to He-Man. With game designer Don Glimne and illustrator Anders Jeppsson taking the lead, the final game was ready for release in 1984. And now, 40 years later, I am holding it in my hands. What an epic and strange game. Maybe it is just nostalgia, but there's something about this game that has excited that little 3-year-old boy in me. The game components are amazing. They absolutely scream out 1980s. The cover art is epic, exactly how I remember the cartoon. Rather than a rule book, the rules are instead printed into the inside of the cover, a nice feature if you, like me, have a tendency to misplace rule books. The game board is a brightly colored desert scene leading through the wilderness up to the ravine that separates the first phase of the game from the second. Castle Grayskull rises out of the other half of the game box with the gaping mouth or maw of the castle drawing in our heroes. Behind the entrance opens up a 3D top-down view of the labyrinthian corridors of the castle leading up to the throne room where Skeletor lies in wait for the adventurers. Along with the board, the game also comes with several other components. There are 4 cardboard characters representing He-Man, Tila, Man-at-Arms, and Stratos that the players can choose from. There are 20 cards representing various challenges the players will face, 21 small weapons tokens, and 6 round battle markers. The goal of the game is for you as a player to race against the others as you navigate the desert and the castle in order to be the first one to make it to the throne room and to defeat Skeletor. On the journey through the desert, your characters will have the opportunity to collect items that are placed throughout. These items could be a great help to you, whether they are a sword, a shield, an axe, a magical breastplate, or even characters such as Battle Cat. But don't spend too much time collecting them, otherwise your opponents may get too far ahead of you. The game is thus divided into 3 phases. First, one collects items in the desert. Second, one enters Castle Grayskull and fights one's way forward to the throne room. And finally, one battles to the death with Skeletor. To move, players roll both dice and choose one of these as the exact number of steps that can be taken. It is possible to pass other players, but not stop on the same square. If a player lands on an item token, it is immediately turned over. If the token is one of the weapons or one of the items, the player can keep the token for later use, but only if the player doesn't already have one of those items in her possession. These will be important later when the players enter Grayskull. The other tokens have a special purpose. Battle Cat will come in handy when crossing the ravine. Wind Rider lets you move your character to any open spot in the desert, even to the other side of the ravine. Beastman and Mirrorman, however, present a hinder. If you get one of these, you must immediately flip over the token again and place one of your items back into any of the available black circle spaces. Eventually, players will make their way to the ravine. This will have to be crossed to make it into the castle. Regardless of one's roll of the dice, all players stop on the last square to end their turn. In their next turn, they must make a roll of 9 or higher. Otherwise, their turn ends, and they must try again next time. With Battle Cat, however, it is possible to jump the ravine with a roll of 6 or higher, and with Wind Rider, one can just fly across. The castle can be entered at any point in the game. For the sake of speed, some players may skip gathering a lot of items and try out their luck. Others might take their time gathering items, but enter the castle at a later point. Here, you need to make a strategic decision. Are you ready or not? All players end their turn at the mouth of the castle, and only in their next turn are they able to enter. Battle Cat and Wind Rider cannot follow in. Once in the castle, the players need to make a couple of choices. Which direction do they take, and how many steps do they take? Players can choose to move 1, 2, or 3 steps, so they no longer use dice to move. And here is where things get even more interesting. If a player moves 1 step, she will need to roll 2 dice. On a result of 5 or lower, she draws a card. For 2 steps, it is 7 or lower, and for 3 steps, one always draws a card. If the player gets a card, she moves first and then resolves the card. Cards have several different effects. The Demon card. Roll 2 dice. On a 2 to 5, you lose one of your items. On a 6 to 12, you are able to take a step forward if you want. The Trap card. Roll 2 dice. On a 2 to 3, you must move your character back to the entrance of the castle. On a 4 to 5, your turn ends, and you must roll again on the trap card on your next turn. On a 6 to 12, you avoid the trap. The Laser Lightning card. Roll 2 dice. If you have the magical breastplate and you roll a 5 to 12, you avoid any consequences. Otherwise, you need to succeed on a roll of 9 to 12. A failure means that you miss your next turn. The Stone Wall card. Roll 2 dice. On a 6 to 12, you break the wall and can continue to the next round. Otherwise, you will need to keep the card and roll again your next turn. The Iron Gate card. Roll 2 dice. If you have an axe, you break the gate on a roll of a 6 to 12. If you don't have an axe, you will need a 9 to 12. If you fail, the gate remains down, and you need to roll again on your next turn. The Armor card. Roll 2 dice. If you have a sword, you defeat the magical armor on a 6 to 12. Without a sword, you will need an 8 to 12 to win. If you fail the roll and have a shield, you will move back 1 square as you are pushed back in combat. Without a shield, you get pushed back 2 squares. At the start of your next turn, you will need to fight the armor again. Eventually, one of the players will make it to the throne room and face down Skeletor. The Skeletor card is placed in front of the player who is fighting, and the player to the left of the fighting player pulls out the 6 round fighting tokens. This player to the left will get to play for the moment as Skeletor. To fight, the player rolls both dice and adds to this total the number of item tokens that she possesses. Then, the player to the left who is standing in for Skeletor rolls both dice. If the attacking player has the higher number, she takes a fist token and places it in front of her. If Skeletor has the higher, she takes a Skeletor token instead. Any tie is re-rolled. The round of combat ends when the attacking player has amassed either 3 fists or 3 Skeletors. 3 Skeletors means that the player has lost the combat and is moved back to the entrance of the castle. 3 fists, however, means that the player has won the combat, defeated Skeletor, and thereby won the game. Well, there you have it, Masters of the Universe. What an interesting little game and an interesting part of gaming history. In one sense, this game screams out 1980s and really belongs in that era. But in another sense, the game is surprisingly engaging with its mix of exciting mechanics that incorporate both strategy and luck. As a young boy, I would most likely have been drawn primarily to the artwork and the gaming board. These are great. But as an adult, I'm drawn to something else. In this game, there are elements of what I love about tabletop gaming. There's a kind of role-playing feel as the characters wander around in the desert looking for items or try to avoid traps, walls, and gates in the castle, sometimes getting aided by creatures and sometimes being hindered by others. And there's a kind of tabletop wargaming feel of a great tabletop game where you find yourself in battle with magical armor or in hand-to-hand combat with the final boss, Skeletor. So maybe my fascination with this game is due not just to nostalgia, but also to a sense of recognition of elements of tabletop gaming that I really appreciate. In the end, credit for this is due to a good game design by Don Glimne and a good IP that seem to work seamlessly together for a pretty cool gaming experience. Well, thank you for joining us today on this trip back in time 40 years as we cover this unique Swedish board game. If you like these kind of videos and you would like to see more of them, please do subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and leave a comment below, and I will continue to investigate other gaming gems like Masters of the Universe. But most importantly, thanks for stopping by here today at Grey Army Gaming for the future of gaming.